according to this, we are live on Facebook Live. And now I'm just going to verify that we are showing up in the other areas. I hope all of you are having a great weekend so far. I know it's just gotten started. So who knows, right? So much yet to be determined. Let's see. Let's check on the YouTube and see how things are going there. Yep, showing up as live on YouTube, which is excellent. Facebook Live is working. Let's go ahead and try Twitch. I'm not even sure why I do Twitch. I get some watchers on there, but I just don't think that too many real estate minded folks are going to be hanging out on Twitch. All right, I'm just going to assume that everything's going fine on Twitch because it wants me to jump through all kinds of login hoops here that I'm just not interested in jumping through. It's been an interesting week for me. All kinds of crazy stuff going on. One involved me moving to a new office. So you'll see once the camera gets going. My background's different. My lava lamp is no longer there. And yes, we are live on LinkedIn. And I'm pretty sure we're live on Twitter. And look at that. Okay. So it looks like everything's ready to go. So welcome to the pre-show for Coffee and Real Estate Live for March of 2023. We've got some interesting thing to talk about. Some of it is stuff that's just remained sort of stable. Some of it's other things that have changed. We'll also get an opportunity to compare where we are at right now with the rest of the country. We've got some national data that I think's interesting to share. I have a couple of, at least I think they're on this presentation. I hope. I have a couple of new pieces of data. One is the months of inventory, because when you look, there are so many things that contradict each other in terms of what are we expecting right now in the market that I think it's worth pointing out. So we'll do that. We'll talk about months of inventory, because if all you looked at is months of inventory, you'd think sellers are doing amazing, and they're not. So it just goes to show you, you need to understand the context, right? No single piece of information should be what makes you make a really big real estate decision or any life decision, right? So we're going to try to put in context for you, and then we'll try to work our mojo. We'll try to gaze into the crystal ball and see where we might be going. And again, if you'd like to interact, that's the whole point, right? So that we can ask questions, explore answers, see what might be a good conclusion for everybody. And I love when we get an opportunity to share these with the group. So, and I know, unfortunately, so many of you ask me questions after the show, so not while it's live, which means nobody else gets to benefit from it unless I bring it up in a follow-up show, right? So I would love it if you've got any questions, feel free to bring it up during the show. We'll be on for at least an hour. I have scheduled my time today so that we could actually go 2 hours if we wanted to. We're going to start here in 10 minutes. For those of you who are here early, and I can see that on a couple of platforms, I have a couple of folks already looking, so welcome to it. Some of you might be a few of my regulars. I know I have a couple of folks who seem to show up all the time, and thank you for that. I appreciate you spending your valuable time with me. We're also expanding it a little bit. I'm trying to dip more into super relevant, hyper local news information. And we've got a bit of that now that affects the Morgan Hill, San Martin, Gilroy, South San Jose area. And I had someone I was on a phone call with somebody. It wasn't like, it wasn't your typical internet interaction, I guess is what I'm trying to say, where it's someone just laying into you for some made up reason. I was talking with someone. We were talking about the potential of what their home would be worth, that kind of stuff. And they're in San Jose, and they had watched a previous Coffee and Real Estate, and they were saying, why do you include San Jose when you're talking about the South Valley? Well, so I have kind of a soft spot for San Jose. And, a huge chunk of San Jose is south, right? So I kind of consider the southern end of San Jose Blossom Valley, right? Think of that. Think of the 85 corridor. If you were to take the 85 corridor and just start at where the 85 hits, I don't know where, like Los Gatos, and then draw a horizontal line. That line south covers an awful lot of San Jose. So that's why I include San Jose in our South Valley discussions. And I love the area. There are some areas that are just so awesome of San Jose. And I know I've told this story before, but back in the olden days, this is the 90s now, I had this stretch of time where either the office I was working for or the team I was on or myself personally were getting listings on these amazing turn-of-the-century homes. And when I say turn of the century, obviously since I'm talking about the 90s, we're talking about between the 19th to the 20th century, or the 1800s to the 1900s. And they're just amazing. There are some amazing homes in San Jose that just get completely overlooked. And I'm sure that there are someone just posted let's see, the price is, oh, okay, that's someone soliciting. Great. Thank you, but no thank you. Someone who wants to promote the show. I appreciate it, but no thank you. And they're on Twitch, of course. So that's, every time I get weird stuff, I get it from Twitch. Anyway, and I realize I'm sure there's a historical society in San Jose. I'm a member of the Historical Society for Morgan Hill. And San Jose, amazing stuff. But so little of it seems to get discussed. We have California bungalows. If you want to talk about the phenomenon of the architectural phenomenon of California bungalows, right? We have several homes in downtown San Jose that are featured in several books about California bungalows. I had the honor of holding one open, and boy, it was a shocker, right? It was very original in terms of the floor, the layout. It still had the butler's pantry. What was amazing is this was this period of time between Victorian and Edwardian architecture. And so you have this home that's only 1,700 square feet. I mean, it's not a giant home, but it has a fireplace that you would expect to see in a 10-bedroom Victorian mansion, right? So you had this very weird, this giant scale of some things that really didn't fit the size of the house, and a home of that size that still had a butler's pantry. But a lot of people would call them a shotgun shack, right? You could stand at the front door and you could fire a shotgun into the house, and all the shot would go out the back door. And it had one of these beautiful double pocket doors in the center of the house, so you could separate sort of the dining area or the private area from the front entry area or the greeting room, right, or the sitting room. And someone had painted it, and it was this amazing mahogany wood that was just beautiful, right? And it had the original light switches, those little black and white buttons that you push to turn the lights on and off. All the original brass fittings, just spectacular. But the times had not been kind, right? With people who had painted over things that just should have never been painted over. And really just a beautiful place. And the kitchen had been really, really screwed up in the 60s or 70s, which was normal. San Jose had a lot of screwed up things happening in the 60s and 70s. One of my sisters was going to San Jose State in the 70s, and I remember her living in a Victorian that had been set up as sort of a flop house with each room rented out. And boy, obviously I was just a little kid, not old enough to appreciate that stuff, but it was a beautiful freaking home from an architectural standpoint. So another interesting thing to note is, since I have moved my office, I am not wired. So this will be the first time I have ever done a wireless stream. And I'm actually kind of impressed with the numbers I'm seeing. Like no dropped frames, excellent kilobits per second. Really kind of impressive. I'm actually kind of stunned. Just for a data security reason, I like to stay wired on any machines I do important work on. So just finished setting up the office yesterday, I think. Yeah, so I'm probably getting into stuff no one cares about. So I'm a fan of the sitting, standing desk, right? Where you can push a button and the desk goes up or it goes down. But I was looking at them online and they seemed ridiculously expensive for what they were. So I kind of built my own. I just bought the up down part and then got myself a desktop from an existing desk that I did not like in terms of the feet or what was under it. And it's great. It's fantastic. It gives me actually more working space. But what I love about it is I'm kind of eyeing some exotic woods. And I'm thinking about creating because this up down system can actually accommodate, it's flexible, right? I can stretch it out to accommodate much wider desks. So I kind of have that in the back of my head at some point to do that, because that would be kind of fun. And then you put just a beautiful wood on it, perhaps with resin for the cover. Anyway, just throwing some things out there. I like to get creative every now and again. I'm not a one-trick pony, right? It's not just real estate for me. All right, we're getting close. 4 minutes to where we're actually going to officially start, and we can just stop listening to me gab about whatever pops into my head. I hope you've all got your favorite coffee with you this morning as we start our chat. I have to admit that I've committed a little bit, at least I think it's a little bit of a sin. Maybe you guys will tell me if it's evil or not. So I had decent coffee, right? I don't tend to just buy the standard stuff. I get beans and I grind them and I espresso them in the machine and all that wonderful stuff. But I'm more of a mocha guy. And I have been using monk fruit to sweeten it because I'm doing a diet thing. I think I mentioned on a show a while ago. And if anyone wants to know, this is less about me and more about if you have a weight issue that you're trying to deal with. I'm on a program right now that's amazing. I've lost over 50 pounds with it so far. I am more than halfway to my goal, and man, do I feel great. And if there was a gift I could give to the universe, it would be that everybody could feel as much better as I do now compared to how I felt just a few months ago, right? So I started this in November, and the weight loss since November, since the first week in November, has been over 50 pounds. So it's something that's not only achievable, but it's not something that's so far over the horizon it's hard to imagine, right? But if anyone's interested in that, we can have a chat about that at the end. I work with it's a very local thing. So unfortunately, if you are in another state, you're going to have to talk to your doctor about simply getting access to the medications that they are prescribing. It's called Jumpstart MD. I go to the folks in Campbell because that's the closest one. But it's been amazing. I thought, what the heck? I'll give it a try. I've tried all this other thing. I've tried exercise. I've tried keto and making sure I'm in calorie deficit and all these kinds of things. But this has worked amazingly well. So it's the primary players seem to be 3 different drugs. One is Wegovy, one is metformin, and one is Contrave. So talk to your doctor. If you're someone who's struggling with weight and you have been for a long time and your doctor's talking about potentially surgical things to do to fix your problems, ask them to prescribe this stuff for you instead, and you will see results relatively quickly. So just something to throw out there for anybody who might be struggling. Everything is looking fan-freaking-tastic. I'm seeing no red lights, no nothing. So I think we're ready to rock and roll. We are literally 2 minutes away from the official start. I hope that those of you who have joined me have brought some good questions or something to the table so that we can chat and potentially get some things dealt with that might be concerning you or that you really want to get more insights into. And I'm not going to guarantee I'm going to have the straight up answer for you right off the tip of my head, but I will promise that we can do a little research together and see if we can't figure it out during our time here online, because obviously the goal is to share answers with everybody. Knowledge is power, right? So that's kind of what we'll shoot for. We'll shoot for finding answers during the show. And if we don't find an answer, I will at least continue to look for the right answer, and I'll get back to you privately and then share it with everyone once that happens. If you're interested, we also, this monthly Coffee and Real Estate is also promoted on a meetup group. It's I think it's the Morgan Hill Real Estate Club. I'm the originator, so just search for me and you can join there. I'm looking to expand what happens there because right now this has pretty much been it, but I'd like to add some other stuff. So I'd love to hear from folks who can provide some feedback on what they think would be good and beneficial things to help everyone achieve their goals in real estate or to do things a little bit more intelligently in real estate, because that's always right. Good. Doing it the smart way. All right. We have hit it. It is 10 a.m. Thank you once again for joining me on a Saturday morning. As you can see, the background has changed. My lava lamp is no longer here. That is one of my son's beds in the background, who no longer lives here. He's off to college. And so I have taken over his bedroom as my new office. My old office got a little bit flooded during the deluge that we had. So carpets got pulled up. Things are happening in there. It's a little bit smaller, but boy, it's always nice, I think, to once in a while go through everything and completely shake up your existence or how you've been doing things for a long time. It was very weird how I was having to do things in that room, not having to do it that way anymore. And it looks like the chat is ready, according to Restream. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and jump in. As we always do, the first thing on the agenda is to really get a bird's eye view. And what we do here each month is take a look at the numbers for Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. And that way, we're able to get a larger sample size in terms of the county. So we can see, in the world where thousands of things are happening a month, what are we seeing in terms of trends? Or what are the things that we're seeing that are different from other areas, right? And we're going to, and by different, I mean comparing the county to, say, the national numbers, because our local numbers are indicating a stronger lean into a buyer's market locally than the national numbers show in many cases. Not always, it's not 100%, but in general, that tends to be the thing. So let's go ahead and jump in. Now, as we always like to do, we are going to discuss the total homes on the market to start. And we're going to look at this from a couple of different standpoints. Let me see if I can get my ugly mug out of the way. Oh, well, that's not what we were hoping for, is it? I can fix that. I can fix that. See, this is what happens when you totally change your office setup. But we'll get there. Everything will be fine. There we go. All right. Ugly mug out of the way, and we can cover this data. So, as you can see, we've got a continuing increase in inventory, but not as extreme in some areas. So in Santa Clara County, last year we had 884 homes on the market. And remember, this is year over year. We're comparing the same time last year to the same time this year. So this is February of 2022 versus February of 2023. That is super important because you're going to come to odd conclusions when you compare month to month. I don't find month to month to be as relevant as other folks do, because that's not what is the takeaway. The takeaway you need to look at more than just last month and this month. You need to look at this month and the last 6 months all on the same chart in order for last month to make any real relevance for you. And the reason for that is seasonal influences. Every month of the year tends to have slightly different performance than every other month of the year. So why get hung up on comparing this month to last month? Particularly since we're in February. So January and January to December, very different months, right? You're dealing with one month where no one wants to be looking at houses. Everyone wants to be on their vacation and dealing with Christmas and having folks at the house, all those kinds of wonderful things. And that's not what's happening in February, right? Not as many people take Valentine's Day as a serious holiday where you take weeks off as you do for Christmas. So comparing those two doesn't make much sense. So that's why I like to, at this point, focus exclusively on year-over-year comparisons. We're obviously going to use month-to-month data, but we're going to use it in the context I talked about, where we're looking back over an entire year or more. And why do we do that? So we can try to see what trends are happening, right? What differences? How does this year template over last year in terms of how we got to where we are this month, plus where we might be going over the next couple of months. So we can use it maybe as a template to do a little predicting in where we're going to go, particularly if last year was very similar to this year. But even if it wasn't in terms of overall volume, honestly, typically you can see that the relative change from one month to the next is similar, even if the activity the year before was far lower. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we're up 10%. Overall inventory, total homes on the market. That's the number that tells us, buyers, how many homes do I have to choose from? And in terms, how many homes do I have to choose from? And if you're a seller, what's the competition? How many competing sellers out there are trying to get the attention? And that's an exact measurement of what inventory is from those two perspectives. And it was up 10% from the same time last year. This year it was at 970 homes on the market versus 884 last year. So not as dramatic an increase as past months, as we'll see in some numbers coming up. We have seen some dramatic increases in inventory, but not this year compared to last year. We've had more than double digits, like you can see how Morgan Hill actually has a very high number. But overall in the county, we've had 15% in past months. We've had 20%. We've had very dramatic increases in past months. So the fact that this has slowed down a little bit is good. I'd prefer a more stable market. And as soon as when we get to this, it's a good thing to see. And another thing to point out is that on a month-to-month basis, right? And normally you want to try to calculate months of inventory based on a year's worth of data rather than just a month. But right now, let's just go ahead and use that monthly data. Right now, we have 1.8 months of inventory. And what that means is if the inventory number and the number of homes sold in the month of February froze, right? And the inventory froze where it is, and the number of homes sold in February stayed the same moving forward into future months, we would have 1.8. We would sell out everything in less than 2 months, right? Just shy of 2 months. That number alone indicates a seller's market. That is not where we are, but that's what that number indicates, right? A low months of inventory is not considered balanced. It's considered in the seller's advantage zone. Normally, you want to get to 3.5, 4.5 months of inventory in order for it to sort of be a balanced market. And then when you get to 8, 9, and 10 months worth of inventory, that's clearly a buyer's market. And we've been there before. After the 2008 downturn, we were absolutely there. But we haven't hit that point here. So while we can make some comparisons to the downturn last time, we're definitely not there in terms of months of inventory. If we take a look at San Jose, last year at this time, we had 444 homes on the market, 457 this year. So a very minor increase of 3% in terms of total inventory. I would call it a wash. When we're under 5% changes and when we have numbers like this, I would call that a wash. Now, when we get to Morgan Hill, it's a different story. We had 29 homes on the market last year, 50 homes this year. That's a 72% increase. And if we talk about, to go back to San Jose for a second, if we talk about months of inventory, San Jose had 1.5 months. So even quote unquote better, I guess, depending on whether you're trying to sell or whether you're trying to buy. But in terms of leaning more towards a seller's market, San Jose leaned more than the county overall. As we get to Morgan Hill and we see we've got 50 homes on the market, that's 2.5 months worth of inventory when compared to how many homes sold in the month of February. So that's the highest number. In the areas that we cover here in South County, that's the highest number. As we look at Gilroy, we can see 34 homes were on the market last year, 49 homes this year. That's a 44% increase, giving us 1.8 months of inventory for Morgan Hill, which is obviously, or for Gilroy, which is right on the same number plane as Santa Clara County overall. So what can we draw from this? As we look at it and we move forward into other data, we can see that things have actually calmed a bit in overall inventory, and we'll see that when we do the month over month stuff. So let's instead of focusing on that now, let's actually move on to the next piece of data and see where we are. Okay, next, new listings. These are the homes that were listed in the month of February compared to the same time last year. And this simply represents what it says. It is sellers who decided to list their home. And this number is derived from the home being entered into the MLS and labeled as an active listing, just so you know exactly what we're talking about. Now, all across the board, we have a huge decline from the same time last year. And as we're going to see here in a minute, so much of the market we're facing right now has less to do with tons of homes getting listed, right, that are feeding the increase in overall inventory, and more to do with just homes staying on the market longer that's feeding the inventory. Now, last year, Santa Clara County had 1,555 homes listed. This year, only 979 homes in February. So that's a 37% decrease from the same time last year. In San Jose, we had 790 homes listed last year, 478 this year. That's a 40% drop. In Morgan Hill, we had that plus should be a minus. Apologies. 64 homes listed last year, 42 homes listed this year, for a 34% decrease from the same time last year. And in Gilroy, we had 52 homes listed last year, 40 homes listed this year for a 23% decrease. And that just tells the story, right? Despite the fact that there are fewer homes being listed, we are seeing homes increase. And there's actually one other piece of data that I like to share with you, and I forgot to open up that app. So let me just do that real quick. Because as I do, you know, in the olden days, for those of you who watched me do these in the old way, I used to just have a spreadsheet. Really, really not visually exciting. But one thing to note is the home sold data, which is coming up next. But I just wanted to make sure that that number is correct. Yes, so that Morgan Hill number is 34%. It's actually 34.4, but I rounded it to the nearest. But it is a negative. It shouldn't be a positive. So I apologize for that slip of the finger as I was entering the data. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at homes sold because we've got some interesting numbers to observe there. So comparing to the same time to last year, in Santa Clara County, total number of homes sold, we had 899 homes sold in Santa Clara County in February of 2022 compared to 540 homes sold in 2023 in February. That's a 40% decrease. And this is really the number, right? The number that's pushing the market, the number that is totally defining the narrative that we're living in right now is the low number of homes sold. It is buyers not coming out and buying. Obviously, interest rates affect that. But there's also a wait and see feeling. What's interesting is we'll talk anecdotally about what I'm seeing in the local market. But one thing I hear from buyers is they're not sure we're at the bottom yet. So a lot of folks they're finding homes they like, but they're not willing to pull the trigger because they want to see where we are in terms of the market potentially coming down more. That's not an unreasonable thing. You'll see here in a minute that there still is a disconnect between what sellers are listing their homes at and what homes are selling at, which has been a very common thread for the last few months. But anecdotally, as I was mentioning, I am seeing a lot more folks coming out looking for homes to buy. I have an awful lot of different websites that I have out there that are specifically catered towards helping buyers start their search. And I've noticed an uptick just over the last month in buyers that are looking. Totally normal for this time of year. March is very frequently when it starts in terms of buyers looking. They want to move typically right around when school ends if there's family involved, that type of thing. But as the weather tends to improve, this is when we start to see it. And I am seeing it. I'm seeing it at levels slightly less than the same time last year, which I think is a reflection of higher interest rates. So we'll see how that pans out. Okay, so as we move forward, San Jose saw a decrease of 34% in the terms of number of homes sold. We had 460 sold last year, 303 sold this year at this time, in February. Morgan Hill saw a 20% decrease, 25 homes sold last year, 20 homes sold this year. Gilroy saw a 37% decrease, 43 homes sold last year, 27 homes sold this year. Now that we've got those numbers put together and we can see number of homes sold versus number of homes listed, let's see what the difference is, right? So how much is the inventory being increased in the month of February? Well, for Santa Clara County, the net difference between the homes sold and the homes listed, we listed 439 more homes than we sold. In San Jose, we listed 175 more homes than we sold. And in Morgan Hill, we listed 22 more than we sold. And in Gilroy, we listed 13 more than we sold. Now, the reason why I mention that is because as we look at numbers further down, we can try to understand why some of these numbers are varying more than other areas. And we're not talking about total number. We're talking about relative number as a percentage of overall percentage, right? So we'll cover that in a second. But for right now, let's finish the rest of the data. Next, a new slide that I've added to the mix here is pending and contingent. The reason why I wanted to do this is in having conversations with folks who've watched the past show, we've talked about how homes sold data is actually, well, let's go back to the homes sold, whoops. Let's talk about, geez, I did that too fast. Okay, the reason why we're doing pending numbers now as well, is this is month-old data, right? And I don't just mean from February. I mean, it's actually from January. When a home sells, officially sells, or actually is listed in the MLS as sold, that means escrow has closed, right? Well, what is escrow? Escrow is a 30 to 45-day process in which the date where the offer was accepted is 30 to 45 days ago. So these numbers actually represent agreements that happened the month earlier, or at least the month earlier. So that's why I've always referred to this as sort of a slightly delayed number. And that's why I wanted to start giving you pending, because what this reflects is the number of homes that changed from actively for sale to pending. And pending isn't included when you're talking about homes sold data. So this is the number of homes that have had offers accepted to the point where the seller and their agent changed the status of the home from actively for sale to pending or contingent. The difference between those two things is pending typically means there are no longer any contingencies. Contingent means it's in escrow, but it is contingent, meaning there's potentially a loan contingency, an inspection contingency, an appraisal contingency, and whatever other contingencies that were agreed on are included in the contract, right? The days of no contingencies is pretty much gone. Those were the days when if buyers came in with contingencies, they didn't get their offer accepted. So those days are typically gone. But another way to also look at this data, which is a way I have looked at it but never really shared, is how many of these fail? How many pending transactions does that translate into solds in the following month? Are there fewer? Because typically there are. Financing is still the number one thing that keeps homes from closing escrow. So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward. All right, so let's take a look at this number. Last year in Santa Clara County, in February of 2022, we had 1,296 homes in February that changed from actively for sale to pending or contingent. Okay? This year it was 831, so that's a 36% decline from the same time last year. San Jose, 662 homes last year, 415 homes this year, for a overall decline of 37%. So very much on par. We're seeing the county and San Jose very similar performance in terms of the percentage of homes on the market that got an offer accepted. In Morgan Hill, that number was also 37%. 60 homes last year, 38 homes this year. Gilroy, fewer. 33% of homes went pending or contingent, that with 51 homes on the market, 51 homes pending last year, 34 homes pending this year. All right, so next, let's take a look at average original list price. And let me explain what I mean by original list price. For those of you who are old timers and you've been around for a while, you know what this is and why I do it. But for those of you who are new, and I can see I've got a few folks here on a couple of different platforms that are hanging out and not participating yet because you haven't asked a question, but who are joining me this morning. So thank you for coming and spending your Saturday morning with me. I appreciate it. But what this is, original list price, is kind of what it sounds like. It's the price the seller originally agreed on. And the reason why I report it like this is because we want one piece of data that gives us some insights into the mindset of the seller. What were they thinking when they listed the home, right? How much did they think they were going to get? And I never did discuss why I think I may have done an evil thing with my coffee. Maybe later. All right. So this is expectations, right? And as a buyer, one of the great negotiating strategies is what was the motivation? What was the mindset of the seller? One of the things I do with my buyer clients is I always look at what the original list price was. Has the price been increased? Has the price been decreased? What explanations can we extract based on that to figure out why that happened? Because that can absolutely have an impact on what our strategy is in terms of an offer we might put together. And in this case, we can see some crazy numbers, and we've actually had a couple of reversals here from past months. So let's take a look. Overall, in Santa Clara County, sellers expected 24% more for their home than the same time last year. So last year, and that's a huge number. And what's funny is in past months, this hasn't been the way this is laid out. This is a very big change if we're talking about month-to-month comparisons, and in terms of expectations, this has been a pretty big change, particularly for Gilroy. And I have no idea. One thing that's interesting about noting here is when you get into areas where the sample size is particularly small, and we're talking dozens of homes when we're talking about Gilroy, and we can kind of explain Gilroy here in a minute. Obviously, one really big listing of a super high amount can have this effect, right? It can make the overall number larger. But Santa Clara County, that's not the case. We have a very large sample size. So $1,712,607 was last year's list price when the home first went on the market. No price increases, no price decreases, nothing. This is when the seller was putting the price on the home, and this is what they wanted to market it at when they listed the home. This year, the average list price was $2,123,401. That's a 24% increase. So on average, sellers in Santa Clara County expected a 24% boost in their home value from the same time last year. So that's completely out of whack. But there it is. In San Jose, far more reasonable. And this is probably the most reasonable month we've seen in San Jose in a long time. Last year, $1,377,451. Increased by 6.3% to this year's $1,463,544. Morgan Hill, and again, Morgan Hill has gotten reasonable all of a sudden. Last year, that number was $1,386,084. This year, it's $1,484,195. That's a 7.1% increase, not a decrease. I don't know why that's a negative number. I apologize. Again, I'm getting my negatives wrong, but it's a 7.1% increase from last year. And same goes for Gilroy, where again, these numbers are correct, but the positive negative in front of them is incorrect. So Gilroy also saw an increase. $1,220,472 was last year's number. This year's number is $1,514,967. And here's what's interesting about a Gilroy and a Morgan Hill, all right? The variety of properties, right? In Northeast Gilroy are multi-million-dollar properties. So the odds-on favorite here is that because Gilroy has been so well calibrated to the market in recent months, the reason for this dramatic increase is because there's simply a home got listed at the higher end at a price that's probably reasonable for the home, but it ended up skewing this data. And if we were to exclude that home, then the real number would be somewhere down closer to 5% or 6%. So, but I wanted to report the numbers as is. And again, I tend to look into these numbers a little more deeply so we can get calibrated to it. So no, this is not, if we just look at the data without taking a closer look and understanding the context, this might indicate some huge change in what's going on with the folks who are selling their homes in Morgan Hill, but it's not. It's really just an outlier that kind of tossed those numbers a little higher. Now let's take a look at sales price. Across the board, they're down, right? So let's understand what the delta is here. Expectations were up 24% in the county. Come on, baby. There we go. But down 10.2%. So the average price that actually sold for was down 10.2. That's a delta of what, 30-something percent? So that's crazy. San Jose, down 17.7%. Well, let's do the county first. So the average sales price last year was $1,722,325. And the number in February of 2023, $1,546,546, which is a 10.2% decrease. San Jose, last year's number was $1,458,030. This year's number was $1,199,517. That's a 17.7% drop. In terms of Morgan Hill, $1,429,524 was last year. This year, $1,232,219, a 13.8% drop. And then in Gilroy, $1,253,303 was last year's number. This year's number, $1,220,218 for a 2.64% drop. So when we look at the actual sales numbers, which obviously is not an opinion thing, right? So it's not what a seller picked. The average price is down 2.64%. And despite the fact in our last slide, we saw that it was a 20+% increase in what seller expectations were once you accommodate for the fact that the one home that sort of drew that up was really a higher end home. Gilroy continues to be the community most calibrated to the realities of the market. Their homes are selling closer to list price because the list price is more calibrated to the market. That is why. You're seeing these bigger differences right now because people are having to take substantially less than what they're listing for. And we're continuing to see that. So we're going to continue to accumulate homes that have listed their homes at higher prices, which is going to push for bigger price reductions as we move forward into the coming months. Now, unfortunately, a slide I always share during this coffee and real estate presentation is what homes had reduced price or what the percentage of reduced prices was. Can't do that this time because that data is not done yet. It takes it's usually after the third week. Usually it's done by the Friday before I do this show, but it wasn't available yesterday. I checked again this morning and it still wasn't available. So we don't have that data. I'm going to show you what last month's was because I have a feeling it'll be on par with last month's because we're still continuing to see homes listed at a whack as it relates to what homes are actually selling for. So I think that will be a thing that we continue to see. All right. Percent of asking price is our next chunk of data. And this is just like the original list price slide was a look into the psyche of sellers. This is more of an insight into the mindset of buyers. How is that the case? Because the percent of price that we're calculating against here is what the price was at the time the offer was made. So if someone accepted an offer and someone presented an offer that was at this level compared to the asking price. So this calibrates us to what buyers are doing. When they're faced with a specific price on a home, what is the price they are offering, which tells us a variety of things. A, given these numbers, we're not seeing multiple offers. If we were seeing multiple offers, we would tend to see over 100%, right? 100% means you got your list price at the time that it sold. So if you had raised your price or lowered your price over the months the home was on the market, whatever that price was at the time the offer was accepted, if it was 100%, then you got exactly what you had it listed for at the time that the offer was accepted. Does that make sense? Let's go ahead and look at these numbers. So in terms of what we're seeing for Santa Clara County, last year the number was 113.7%. That means that on average in Santa Clara County, sellers were getting 13.7% over asking price. Let's also point out that March was really the last month where that was the strong element, right? Interest rates started to go up in March and after March. So we start to see that softening. So starting with next month's data, we're going to start seeing a year-to-year comparison that reflects similar market influences in terms of interest rates and that sort of thing, which is going to be interesting to see because it'll give us an opportunity to see where we're going with all of the data being from the same pool of reality relating to interest rates and financing challenges. Yeah. Right now, though, on average, and this is still a pretty impressive number because it's up from last time, is 109.9% this year. Now, that's still a 12.8% drop overall from last year. And I don't mean the number dropped 12.8%. I mean literally specific 12. You're now getting 12.8% less than you were a year ago. But that still means that we're seeing offers over asking price most likely. Not only are we seeing offers, we're probably seeing multiple offers, but you're getting almost 1% over your asking price overall in Santa Clara County. So that's actually pretty good. In San Jose, it's actually 101%. Last year, it was 114.8, so you were getting 14.8% over asking price. Now you're getting 1% over asking price. So very much on par with the county in general. However, once we get to Morgan Hill, we can see that we've dropped from 106.8, where 6.8% over asking price was the norm. This month, in February of 2023, we're seeing 98.6, so about a 1.4% drop from list price, from the asking price, but overall an 8.2% drop from the same time last year. In Gilroy, last year, 106.8, so the same number as Morgan Hill, 6.8% over asking price. Now we're seeing 96.7. That's an overall drop of 10.1% from the same time last year. So that's a 2.3% drop for Gilroy when compared directly to the asking price. And again, given the fact we've seen these other numbers relating to what Gilroy is seeing in terms of what the average sales price is and historical data relating to what their average list price was, original list price, Gilroy continues to be far more calibrated to the realities of the market than other areas. But we can see that there's still challenges in terms of having to take lower than what your list price was. Let's go ahead now and take a look at days on market. Now, this is a number that obviously has taken a huge jump. Last year, we saw that in Santa Clara County, we had 15 days on market, and anything under, say, 15 to 16 days is an artificial number when we're talking about the market of that time, right? This was real estate agents that were putting a number in the listing that said, we're not going to accept any offers until such and such a date, which was normally a week or 2 weeks out from the day it was listed. So that's how you get to 15 days. In Santa Clara County, that was at 15 days this year. In February of 2023, it's 33 days. That's a 120% increase from the same time last year. San Jose, 11 days, February of 2022, 32 days, February of 2023. That's a 191% increase. In Morgan Hill, we saw a 141% increase, 22 days last year, 53 days this year. Gilroy, 107% increase, 30 days last year, 62 days this year. And again, I know I give this speech every time. I never really know how many folks actually, internalize this stuff. But days on market, I think, has a psychological effect. Once you can say the house has been on the market for a month and we haven't gotten an offer, or we haven't gotten an offer anywhere near our asking price, serious questions need to get asked. And as I've said in past months, and as I've said in my podcasts, you really need to have these conversations earlier than the first month. If you get to the first month with no offers, there's two questions you need to ask. Why aren't we getting offers? And why weren't we having this conversation 2 to 3 weeks ago? Given the way the market is right now, you need to be paying very close attention to how much attention your home's getting. And it's never been easier in terms of how many phone calls have you been getting for more information? How many requests for disclosures have happened? I mean, this is all digital. So when it happens, it's not like someone clicks a link and just invisibly gets it. Or at least that's not the way it should be getting run, right? I get a statistical rundown. How many people have viewed the property? How many people have favorited it on Zillow? How many people have downloaded the disclosures? That kind of thing. How many people have asked to see it? How many people have visited it and used the lockbox to get into the property? If you're not seeing numbers that indicate a relevant level of interest, conversations need to happen. And you can usually start amassing that within the first week of the property being on. The first week is always a big one for me. I always look at the Zillow numbers. I always look at the Realtor.com numbers. I always look at the MLS numbers. And if you're not getting the attention that you know is the right level of attention for a home, and as a real estate person, you should know that from experience, conversations need to happen with sellers in order to calibrate. Because every day you're waiting to make that price change, you're losing money, right? Because the price you could sell it for today is more than the price you could sell it for in a month. So the more you delay, the more you cost yourself. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the historical data. Now, as I've said, this is the month-to-month data going all the way back to, let's see, let me pull up the big view here so I can follow right along with y'all. So this is total active listings, and we can see that we sort of peaked in June and July of 2022, and that's the highest it's been going all the way back to June of 2020, with a decline right up to December, which would be, if you look at the Decembers, right, November, December is when we always see the biggest dips, and that's the seasonal influence that I keep talking about. What's interesting is, take a look at what happened between January and February of this year. That one is a shocker. Why? Look at past years. That is not the trend we tend to see between January and February. Between January and February in past years, we have seen an increase in the total number of homes on the market and the total active listings. But look at last year. Between January and February, increase. 2021, between January and February, increase. Not seeing it this year. That is a concern. Now, I would love to say that that's because we're selling off so much and so inventory has been dropped down, but we know that's not the case, right? We know that the number of homes sold isn't represented there. So let's go ahead and put on some more stuff here so we can try to get a feel. New listings. The good news is we've got a jump, right? But the jump is slow. it's one of the reasons why I think overall inventory has dropped. If you look at between January and February of this year, look how it slows down. It still goes up, but it slows down. And in fact, the total number of active listings and the total new listings cross over in Santa Clara County. They reach each other, which is not a good thing. When listing as many homes as you have on the market, that's kind of a bad. I would have loved to see more. I would have loved to see far more new listings, right? To boost that number, to boost that total active number. My point was I would like to see this go over it, not stay at it or below it. Because look at the past numbers, right? If we look at new listings, we can see new listings between January and February of last year, relatively big increases, right? Look at the January and February numbers for 2022. That's a big jump going all the way up to March, and we're not seeing that. Look how much those lagged compared to the trends of previous years. Next, let's look at the total number of homes sold. Now, homes sold between January and February went up. Is that normal? Well, let's look back. January of 2022, yep. January and February, up. January and February of 2021, up. So yes, that is the trend we tend to see. And in terms of how much of a curve up we've seen, it's on par with past markets. So the total number of homes sold in terms of the direction of that graph tends to mimic past years. So at least I think that's actually reasonable, but we're not seeing it reflected in declining inventory. But remember, inventory is still low, historically speaking, in terms of looking for a balance between whether it's a buyer's or seller's market. Now let's look at pending. This is a new bit to the graph that I've added for this month. We can see a big jump in pending. Look at that. That is a very healthy jump between January and February. So that's homes that have accepted an offer and they changed the status from active to pending or contingent. So let's take a look at the difference between January and February of last year for pending. Same thing. January and February, huge jump in 2022. If we look at between January and February of 2021, same thing, nice, big, healthy jump. Is this jump as healthy as previous years? I'm not sure I'd go that far. It's pretty close. I mean, if we look at where we're here for January and we're here for February, and we see we're here for January and here for February, the slope is slightly less, but on par, right? So that's not bad. I find that encouraging, particularly considering we hadn't gotten into the bad part of the market last year. So the fact that while we're in a downtown part of the market, that pending numbers, buyers who've committed to buying a home with a contract and sellers who have accepted those offers, is on par with the rate of increase from past years when we weren't in the high interest rate world, is actually kind of encouraging. So I think that's a bit of encouragement we can take out of these numbers. Next, Santa Clara County list price versus sales price. We can see that the list price and the sales price diverge pretty substantially. Really big jump from January to February. And when we look at past years, the January to February last year, they were on par with each other. The two were very much more calibrated. And then if we look in 2021, we can see that in January, the list price was way out of whack, but then in February it came down to where, but again, just to calibrate to you in your head, and I know I should just go back and do this because I think it makes sense. These are instances, these really big jumps are instances when someone incorrectly listed the home price, added a zero accidentally, so it caused it to jump real high. So even for a market as big as Santa Clara County, you can get these. But I should really go back and edit these numbers because I've already gone back and looked at these months, and yes, these are months when some real estate agent made an error in the data that they entered when they listed a home, and by adding a zero or by adding a 1 or by adding a 9 by mistake, completely threw off the numbers. So a home that was going to be sold for, that was listed for $1 million ended up getting listed for $91 million. That kind of crazy stuff. So anyway, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next look over our shoulder. This is percent of asking price. The trend here isn't going to be hard to spot. This is a great one for really trying to get a feel for the trend. The steady decline is there, but look at February. We saw a nice uptick in February compared to January. If we look at the January of last year versus the February, there was an uptick then. We tend to see the market start to escalate from January to February, continuing on to March, where last year it peaked. The year before it peaked a month later, but I don't think we'll see that. I think probably what we'll see is a peak in March this year that will March, April, I would guess, will probably be on par with each other, simply because there's different market influences right now. But overall, we can see that we've had a little bit of an increase, right? A 1%, almost a 2% increase in percent of asking price. So that's interesting to see, particularly when we look at the history of where we've been and where we're at. All right. Days on market. Another one that is absolutely clear to see. The trend there is not outrageous, but the interesting thing to note this month is this is the first time we've seen in the county a decrease in the total number of days on market between January and February. I think that's encouraging because we have not seen that since April of 2022. We have seen it steadily increasing at different rates, but steadily increasing since April of 2022. So this is the first month where we've seen a bit of a decrease. Since we're seeing so many different numbers start to appear to be plateauing, it's interesting to theorize that we may see a relatively flat market in the coming months. If interest rates continue to come down, we may end up seeing a resurgence. And if we do, it wouldn't surprise me if competitive bids start becoming a thing again, since we have so little inventory, relatively speaking, right? We've definitely seen some big growth, but we're comparing it to times when the market was insane and homes were selling as soon as they listed. And again, typically we have under 2 months worth of inventory, which if we start seeing an uptick in the homes that are selling, that market is quickly going to become very competitive, because we will at some point just naturally expect that we will start selling more homes than we're listing at the rate that we're currently at. Definitely not happening yet, but if interest rates start to come down, it wouldn't surprise me. Okay. The next bit of data is the percent of listings with reduced prices, and I don't have any data for this month. But given what we've seen, these are the numbers for last month. So last month in Santa Clara County, it was 23.4%. San Jose was 26.8%. Morgan Hill was 30.4%. Gilroy was 31.4%. As soon as this data comes out, I'll share it. I almost always do anyway. I usually share it on Instagram and Facebook. So feel free to follow me there on Instagram. It's the Rebel Broker. Or just Rebel Broker, I think. Or, of course, I think you can also find, I believe, on the page for for White Lawn Sons Real Estate, where we're doing this live stream, I think you can find the link to the Instagram there as well. So, or go to soldbyrobert.com and you can find my link to my Instagram there as well. And I try to keep it serious. Every once in a while, I'll post something a little bit more personal, but I try to keep it relevant. I'm not trying to push anything on you. I just try to give you data that helps you make better decisions in the world of real estate. All right. I believe that is it for the summary of the month. If you've got any questions about any of that data, feel free to throw them my way. Definitely some interesting stuff. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the top, right, in the pre-show chat, where so much of what we are seeing now is really sort of a flattening or a stabilizing, I guess we could call it that. And there's actually a couple of articles we can talk about here in a minute that kind of refer to our market as stabilizing or stabilized. So let's see. Let's first hit some local news stuff. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and go with checking out what's on the browser. Okay. So this is obviously the Morgan Hill Times, and this is one I wanted to throw out there because it's local flavor, and I super love this stuff. For those of you who don't live in Morgan Hill, but boy, should you want to. Morgan Hill's a great town. I love Morgan Hill. And what's funny about Morgan Hill is it wasn't even on my radar when I ended up moving here. I've been here since 2004. Before that, I was living in Aptos, which is a coastal town in Santa Cruz County. And that was great, right? We had just started the family. We had our oldest boy, and then we had twins. And our mornings we lived just a couple of blocks from the beach. So the funny thing is we had found out we were pregnant with twins right after buying the house. and immediately realized we're going to run out of space pretty quick with three little boys running around that were all within a year and a half to 2 years of each other. So we ended up deciding, okay, we need to move. But as I was saying, the morning routine was awesome, right? You could get up, drop the twins in the stroller. Their big brother, who was about 16 months older, was finally to the point where he was walking, so one of us could hold his hand, and we'd walk down to the little coffee place right at the end of, was it Moosehead Drive? I think it was Moosehead Drive. Hang out at the beach, have a coffee. So it was great. I mean, I enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of the ocean, so that was great. And I thought moving inland, oh, who wants to do that? And Morgan Hill was always the place you stopped to get gas when you were on your way to someplace more important. So I had never really gotten into Morgan Hill. But then at the urging of some folks that my wife at the time worked with, where she was working at Cisco, I said, you got to check out Morgan Hill. We're like, okay, all right, we'll check out Morgan Hill. So started doing some stuff in Morgan Hill and fell in love. Now, the mushroom cloud, for those of you interested in moving to Morgan Hill, we can have a chat over a coffee or an adult beverage about what the mushroom cloud is. But mushrooms are a big thing. That's why we have the mushroom festival here. There are still mushroom farms here, far fewer than there were in 2004 when I moved here. But the mushroom cloud is a thing, and the mushroom cloud is a stink, and it's the worst stink you can imagine. Not all the time, just sometimes, but it was dropping off the kids to kindergarten at Nordstrom Elementary School. Man, that was a stinky thing to deal with when we were first starting the kids off in school. But aside from, which is now no longer a thing, if you're dropping off kids for kindergarten at Nordstrom, you're not smelling it anymore. That particular mushroom farm is gone, unless it's one of those really strong days, and then the from other farms that may creep over. But Morgan Hill's a great town. We have wineries all over the place, and this is a story about one of them, and I'm going to suggest you guys jump in, right? So this is the Santa Clara Valley Wine Auction, is set for March 25th. Put it on your calendar. I think it's worth everybody's time. Stacy Giannini, Director of Marketing for Wineries of Santa Clara Valley, who helped stage the first regional tasting for the group last year at the Mountain Winery in Saratoga, anticipates a good turnout for the upcoming annual wine auction March 25th at Guglielmo Winery in Morgan Hill. So they're doing it right here in our backyard. I've been to the Guglielmo Winery a bunch of different times. It's awesome. They've been around forever. They've been around since 1925. The Guglielmo family has owned, and I apologize if I'm butchering their name. I've always just said it that way, and no one's bothered to correct me, so I'm assuming I'm close. Has owned and operated the facility since Italian immigrants Emilio and Emilia Guglielmo saved up enough money to purchase acreage in Morgan Hill, where they planted vines and built the winery that is still in use today. And there are so many great businesses in Morgan Hill. I remember when I was very involved with the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts, right? And we have the float, the Boy Scout Cub Scout Christmas float that gets parked out on Main Street in Morgan Hill. They used to let us store it at the winery, and I think they still do. And it's obviously been a while. My kids are all either out of college or just about to be out of college. So it's been a while since they've been involved, but I would strongly suggest you guys check this out. I think these kinds of events are great. The fact it's happening here in Morgan Hill is awesome. And head on out, have some great wine, a great local wine, and enjoy yourself. Have a good time. Now, bringing it a little bit more back to real estate, this is we have a lot of construction going on in Morgan Hill. Projects under construction will bring more than 950 new homes to Morgan Hill. According to City Hall staff reports, there are currently 8 residential projects under construction. These range from a small cluster of single-family homes to large rental apartment complexes, and all have been approved for construction for months or even years in some cases. Mayor Mark Turner noted that some of the projects being built now date back to the city's residential development control system, which hasn't been active since the California legislature approved an emergency housing law in 2019 that overrides local regulations. And that's another thing. If you're someone who wants to buy and build, right? I happen to have a listing on a lot that is literally on the border of Morgan Hill. And the fact it's not in Morgan Hill may be a disadvantage because you can't connect to city water. But I think it's a huge advantage because you don't have to jump through the hoops of Morgan Hill City Hall to get your home built, which can be a huge pain in the butt. All you have to do is go through the county. It's almost 3 acres, beautiful, and because it's right on the border of the city, it is so close. It's only 4.1 miles from downtown, It's a beautiful lot. And if you build where the slope is, you're going to get amazing views to the west. So there are great opportunities for folks who want to be part of the Morgan Hill community. And if you want to do it in an area where you can buy land, build a home, and then end up having a home with built-in equity, the average home in that area sells for 1.4 million bucks. You could buy this lot and build yourself a home and probably have instantly about $500,000 in equity, 500,000, maybe 400,000 in equity. So I'm still a big fan of building. For those of you who are willing to take that on, and I realize it's a stress, it is one of those things as an alternative to just buying a ready-built home that I suggest to folks. My two big things right now: house hacking, where you buy a multifamily home and you live in one and rent out the other. That almost always flows cash better than other options. And it can be a hassle, I suppose. If you're careful about who you rent to, I don't think you're representing a huge risk to yourself. And I'll be happy to help anyone come up with a strategy for screening tenants. But the amount you end up paying per month ends up being far less. Because if you get a 3-bed, 2-bath duplex where each side is 3-bed, 2-bath, and the average 3-bed, 2-bath sells for $1.2 million or $1.3 million in Morgan Hill, you're not paying $2.6 million. You're probably paying 1.5 or 1.6. So clearly, and the great news is a lot of lenders will now take into account you're going to be able to rent that other half. So you'll qualify for that. Even if you were only approved to say 1.3, you'll get approved for that 1.6 if you handle it right. And then when it's all said and done, you can in many cases have the vast majority of your mortgage payment picked up to the point where you're not paying nearly as much as you would have expected. So keep that as if you're a buyer who's trying to get strategic and get hands-on and build that real estate empire, because then you can enjoy the fact you're getting a residential loan for a multi-unit home, and you can do that up to 4 units, meaning 4 single units in a property, right? If you just keep building duplexes, triplexes, or quads, or keep buying those can always be owner occupied if you live in one of them. And just make that your first purchase. Live in it for 2 years, then make another purchase. Do the exact same thing again, maybe with a triplex or a quad. But I super duper love Morgan Hill duplexes. We've got a couple of different areas in Morgan Hill where there's some great duplexes. So it's something to think about if you want to live in Morgan Hill and you want to try to house hack a little bit. And the other option is buying land. I came super close to buying a lot. It kind of got bought out from under me actually about 5-6 years ago, which was amazing. But it was inside city limits, so huge additional expense. And that's something else to keep track of if you're buying a lot. If you're buying a lot within city limits, make sure you talk to the city about what they're going to make you do if you improve that lot with a home. In the case of Morgan Hill, the things they wanted in terms of you building sidewalks and doing all these other things, before you'd ever even do anything to the lot that relates to you actually building the house, you'd have to come up with $180,000 more to deal with the stuff the city wants you to do. Just a thing that typically happens in city restrictions that doesn't tend to happen in county restrictions, or at least to a far lesser degree. All right. Anyway, so lots of construction going on. In total, when fully built and occupied, these projects will bring more than 950 new homes to Morgan Hill. And obviously they're including the rentals, the apartment complexes in these. And that doesn't include numerous other housing developments that have been approved but not yet reached the construction stage, and others that are in an application and assessment phase in the city planning office. Turner pointed out that many of the approved and under construction units are a product of fairly recent state housing laws, which is known as the housing crisis, allows unlimited residential permits and expedited permitting process in an effort to resolve California's housing shortage. So the takeaway from that is the state had, well, and it annoys me that this is something that happens between the state and local governments. I'd like them all to get far more out of the way when it comes to answering market needs. But so the state decided we need to do something and then forced the hand of local governments to not restrict residential growth as much as they wanted to. And Morgan Hill's been huge at restricting residential growth. So while the outcome is good in terms of people who want to buy a house, I'm not a fan of how it got there. I mean, for my money, the city should have never been able to tell you can't. You should be able to buy a lot and build on it, and as long as you're following the rules, that should be good enough. It shouldn't be, well, we don't want too many residential units in the community. Well, no, that shouldn't be what they get to decide in terms of what you do with the property you just bought. All right, so next, again, if you've got any questions, Feel free to post them here in the chat. I am looking at both Facebook and the Restream thing. So, or wait a minute, is that? Yeah, okay. Not seeing anything there. Okay. New construction picks up in February. So across the board, not just in Morgan Hill, we were seeing some construction picking up in February. New residential construction, so total is up 1 unit. So that's single family residential is a little bit up, but not as much as I'd like to see. What's dominating is multi-unit. And they're only counting 5+ units. I'm not sure why we're not getting 2, 3, and 4 on that. I would like to see that, but unfortunately we're not. I would like to see an awful lot more on the single family residential units. But there you go. Let's see. New home completions are up for 5 units or more. Again, the focus is on multifamily. And in this case, since it's 5 or more, let's call them apartments. Very rarely are you going to see a 5-unit multifamily development where the units feel like anything other than an apartment. Typically even quads, right? I've seen triplexes that feel very much like single family residential homes or townhomes. But once you get to 4 and 5, it's typically a square building with 2 units downstairs and 2 units upstairs. And that 5th unit might be a slightly larger unit off to the side that's maybe for the owner or for the property manager or whatever. That might be, say, 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, while the others are 2 and 1 kind of things. I'm not a fan of those. I realize they're needed, but I don't think they're needed at these volumes. Anybody who has driven on the 85 in South San Jose and looked at those apartment complexes that are just a crush of humanity knows what I'm talking about. And I talk to an awful lot of folks who are renters in those units who want out. It is such a crush. It is the least desirable of apartment living, in my view. So, all right. In terms of weekly housing trends, now this is also from the National Association of Realtors via Realtor.com. Some of the key takeaways: housing market indicators were remarkably stable. The reason I highlighted it, our numbers are showing the same thing. We're seeing a lot of what we would call stability if we actually take a look at the number and understand the context of them. Let's see, the median listing price continued to rise, clocking in, and remember, this is listing price, at 6.3% higher than last year. If we compare that to what we saw, boy, our expectations higher in an awful lot of areas. Santa Clara County, right? More than double that number, 3 times that number in terms of expectations. New listings, a measure of sellers putting homes up for sale, were again down this week by 18% from 1 year ago. We're seeing the same thing. If we look at our numbers, though, in terms of new listings, big difference, right? They're seeing, what was the number? 18%? 18% from a year ago. Down 18% in terms of new listings. Santa Clara County new listings down 37%. San Jose down 40%. Morgan Hill down 34%. Gilroy down 23%. So in every single one of the markets that we look at in the South County, in terms of national average, we are blowing it out of the water in a not good way in terms of the total number of new listings. Inventory growth continued to climb with for sale homes up 61% nationally. What's interesting is the only place that saw a number on par with that was Morgan Hill, with 72% active listings increased. The next closest was Gilroy at 44%. So overall, we're not seeing the inventory growth that they are nationally in terms of a percent. But it's interesting that we're seeing that disparity, right, between those 2 sets of numbers. Homes spent an extra 18 days on market. Let's see, days on market. We're seeing about the same, right? I guess, it would be smart to do a calculation on that to see. So like 15, 16, 17, about 18 days. It's about 18 days. So let's see. Yeah, we're on par with that. In some, a lot more. I mean, 22 to 53 is obviously more. 30 to 62 is obviously more. I mean, that's 32 days more. But for the county overall, we're seeing about that, about 18 extra days, about 18 more days than a year ago to get a home sold. In terms of the payoff numbers here relating to just sort of summaries, and this is for the week. This is the year over year, same week last year. Median listing price up 6.3%. New listings down 18%. Active listings up 61%, and time on market 18 days slower. What else have we got here? Realtor reports. We already covered these numbers in the previous one. I actually went to the source instead of looking at that one. This is one I thought was interesting from the standpoint of where are the opportunities for I talked to an awful lot of folks who are either, what's the most common one? I frequently talk to folks who are investors. They've already invested. They're interested in moving forward with more investing, finding their best deals. And so many of them are looking at a state. Idaho, Tennessee, Arizona, Texas, Florida. It's tough for folks frequently to find things in California that entice them. Some of it for various policies that are happening or hostility to landlords, that type of thing. But the top 10 single-family residential growth counties for 2023 with the greatest annual increase in rental returns, not a single one of these is west of the Mississippi, right? We've got Camden, New Jersey, Cook County, Illinois, Indian River County, Florida, Shelby County, Tennessee, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, Gloucester County, New Jersey, Polk County, Iowa, Collier County, Florida. So Florida represented twice on this list. Louisiana, Jefferson County, Louisiana, New Haven County, Connecticut. So it's interesting to see how some of these bigger growth areas are way out of our area. So if you're someone who wants to really pursue where the most fertile ground is, you have to be very comfortable with long distance investing. And I know an awful lot of folks aren't. I understand why. But the reality is, if that's what you want to do, if you want to try and get something going with an investment property, and get the biggest returns, you need to consider a little bit more distance between you and your property. Next on the hit list for today, and I know we're at 11 o'clock, but that's not a problem. As I said, I gave ourselves plenty of time. One thing I thought we could talk about was this Silicon Valley Bank thing. And I'm not going to pretend to have a huge amount of knowledge here, but I thought that Forbes did a pretty interesting summary of this. And these are it. They sort of summarize it in the key facts. So you can head on over to Forbes if you are so inclined. But California-based Silicon Valley Bank was closed Friday morning by the state's financial regulator. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation announced becoming the largest bank to fail since the 2008 financial crisis. The closure capped a few tumultuous days for SVB. One other thing that was interesting was something I heard from another outlet was the executives at SVB had given themselves a bonus literally days before things started to take a dump. Sure hope somebody can get that money back. Because at its core, no matter what these bullet points have to say, that's a mismanagement problem, right? That's bad decisions. The closure capped a few tumultuous days after SVB, a lender to technology startups, after it announced Wednesday it had sold $21 billion in securities at a loss of $1.8 billion and would seek to raise $2.25 billion in capital. It sought to sell $1.25 billion in common stock and $500 million in convertible preferred shares, and it announced a deal with General Atlantic to sell another $500 million of common stock contingent on the other common stock offering closing. Shares of parent company SVB Financial were halted Friday morning after falling 64% in pre-market trading, following a 60% dive on Thursday as investors quickly sold shares. Amid concerns about the bank's stability, some venture capital funds, including Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, advised portfolio companies to pull money out of SVB. CEO Greg Becker told the bank's clients to stay calm and that the bank has ample liquidity during a conference call Thursday. SVB Financial was in talks to sell itself after attempts of raising capital failed. CNBC reported, though plans to find a buyer were abandoned. The FDIC created the National Bank of Santa Clara to protect insured depositors who will have access to their insured deposits no later than Monday, March 13th. Other banks took a hit amid SVB's failure as investors and analysts scope out other problems similar to those SVB faced, including First Republic Bank, whose shares fell as much as 52% during early trading and have since plummeted even more. And, I know we're not through all these points yet, but if I've got any listeners out there who have insights into this, and I know I have an awful lot of folks who listen who are in banking. I'd love to get your 2 cents on this. This seemed like such a can of worms. I had other things I could do that would that would not annoy me as much as this. Just 2 days after SVB failed, New York-based Signature Bank was shut down by regulators, becoming the third largest bank failure in U.S. history, right behind SVB. Signature Bank tried to find a buyer to raise funds. Signature had previously suffered because of a bet on crypto. There's crypto again. We've talked about other cases where crypto really bit folks who invested heavily in it. But board member and former Congressman Barney Frank said the final blow to the bank was an SVP-generated panic. My rule is never listen to Barney Frank about anything. And I realize that might put me in trouble with some folks on a political basis. But if you go back and listen to the part Barney Frank played in the 2007 and 8 period of time, geez, the Barney Frank may be a exceptional source and expert in something. Banking is not it. Just Google it. Just Google the stuff Barney Frank was saying in 2006, 7, 8, and 9, or even after, even when the writing was so clearly on the wall that you'd have to be blind to not see it. He was out there waving the flag for how wonderful things were, primarily because he and some other folks were the primary contributors to how things went bad. He was a huge supporter of the mechanisms that caused so much of that problem. So anyway. On Sunday, the Treasury Department announced protections for depositors at SVB and Signature Bank assuring depositors they'll have access to their funds on Monday. However, shareholders and unsecured debt holders were not covered by the plan. In a Monday speech, Biden insisted the government is not pursuing a taxpayer-funded bailout, stating no losses will be borne by the taxpayers and distinguishing his administration's actions from the 2008 financial crisis bailout. I sure hope that's true. This is one, if there was an area I was going to look into more, it would be this one, because I can't help but think that there's going to be a very subtle distinction between a bailout from the GSEs, right, which are government-sponsored entities, and a quote-unquote taxpayer bailout, because any GSE bailout is a taxpayer bailout, whether they want that to be true or not. The Federal Reserve announced an emergency lending program to ensure banks can meet the needs of their depositors and to eliminate an institution's need to quickly sell those securities. SVB reported $212 billion in assets for the fourth quarter of 2022, making it the second largest bank failure in history. SVB invested in debt like U.S. and I think this is one of the key points that I thought contributed. Reach out to me if you feel like there's different information here that's relevant, but invested in debt like U.S. Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. But as the Federal Reserve began to increase interest rates to combat inflation, the value of SVB's investments fell. Higher interest rates also took a toll on SVB's clients. Startup funding began to dry up as private fundraising became more costly, causing its clients to withdraw funds. Amid the surge in withdrawals, SVB sold assets, including bonds that had lost value due to interest rate increases, which created a $1.8 billion excuse me, in losses. All right, so we're there. We're at the end. I've got a couple of more things I wanted to hit here. This is a new data service that I'm using to try to inform what we talk about. This is something that I'll use frequently when I'm trying to get calibrated to comparing us to the nation. So as you can see, that's Alameda County. There's Santa Clara County. Net migration is down 2.62%, but that's comparing 2020 to 2021. And all the data that I've been looking at indicates that number has gotten worse in terms of people leaving. Median list price map. These are all great little data points. So if any of you have a data geek itch to scratch, feel free to reach out. Again, Santa Clara County. This is from Realtor.com, and the median is down $41,650. So I thought that was interesting data. It's a subscription thing. 50 largest price drops by city. Fremont, 3.31%. See, this is the reason I like this is because it really gives you an opportunity to see where are you seeing great places you could potentially go. So that's Las Vegas, that's Peoria, that's obviously Phoenix and all that. I mean, Phoenix should be, you should just call this the greater Phoenix area, right? It completely surrounds the whole area. And then that's Reno. I like Reno. I think the weather, while you do get snow there, though, I think the weather there is actually a little bit more uh, interesting. So, but anyway, and these are the various areas. One thing that I find interesting is here's Idaho. Um, and we talked a while before things went crazy in Idaho on my podcast. We talked about how Boise was a great opportunity, and sure enough, as soon as we talked about that, obviously it didn't happen because I talked about it. We just sort of anticipated it. Things went nuts at Boise. I actually went to Boise and took a look at the real estate there and noticed the insane gentrification in downtown Boise and thought it would be a great investment. Sure enough, it sure was. But boy, has that bubble come and gone. Boise's seeing a really big downturn. In terms of other areas, if we look at Austin, look at that, 13.8 price reduction. So this is some interesting, cool stuff. And I'm a bit of a geek. Building permits authorized by county. So this is another way to sort of calculate how much action there is going on out there in the world. What's interesting is versus 2019, the inventory is down 35.67. Total permits, 6,443. But look at that. The 1 units are just over half, which I think is good. But 5+ units is 3,000 with 22 units. See, I really wish there were more duplexes happening. I think duplexes really straddle the line between in terms of creating neighborhoods, right? It's the closest you're going to get to having a single family residential home, because by and large, duplexes, the wall that they share is typically the garage and maybe the kitchen, right? So you're not sharing walls that are super strategic. And I think it's great opportunities. I wish more duplexes were being made in Santa Clara County. I think that would be fantastic. All right, next let's talk mortgage rates. We are right now down. Last month was bad. We were huddling right up against the highest. Right now it's at 6.55 for 30-year fixed. 15-year fixed is 5.98. Still not enough of a difference between those two that I think makes it worth it. And then there's the adjustable rate mortgage at 6.35. And again, I think that look at the price difference. $1,556 for an ARM or $1,588 for a 30-year fixed. Why in the world would you do an adjustable rate mortgage in today's market? Just please don't. Just come up with the extra money and guarantee yourself that your housing costs will never rise. Right? With adjustable rate mortgage, if we see rates go up, your rates go up, right? It may be locked in for 5 years or, that kind of thing. Just don't do it. I think it makes far more sense. And I think ultimately the fixed rate will be good for you. You'll save money over the term. And then when rates do come down, if they come down, and I'm guessing they will, simply because at some point we're going to stop fighting inflation and start fighting recession. And to fight recession, you lower rates. It wouldn't surprise me if we see rates down around 4%, maybe even sub 4%, and then that would be the time to refinance. So go ahead and do it that way. Two last things I'm going to hit here before we say goodbye. One, here's my website, soldbyrobert.com. Feel free to check it out. This is a cool little tool. While there is some AI in this in terms of responding to you if I'm not available, this actually pings me on my phone and on my desktop. So if I'm on my desk doing work, or if I have my phone and I'm out in the world and I'm not with a client, this will actually message me. So if you want to talk, feel free to jump in and take advantage of that. That's something I added recently. If you want to find out what the value of your home is, take advantage of this tool. If you want to start your search, take advantage of this tool. Either way, you can get started and you can start your search. Super easy tool. You can refine your search down, whatever you want to do. You can zoom in on the markets that most interest you. That's great. The other thing is that this is brand spanking new. So this is something I started offering. No one is subscribing to it yet. It's literally days old. This is Streams, and it comes from a service that lets you create searches of a variety of different kinds. I've actually got a few folks that are subscribing to the homes listed in Morgan Hill one. And the reason why I like this one is we can create whatever ones. These are ones I've created to promote in different venues. So there's one for Gilroy Homes, there's one for Morgan Hill Homes, there's one for South San Jose, and then there's one for multifamily, 2 to 4 units in Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy. So if you're someone who would like to get updates, live updates when changes happen in any one of these kinds of markets, or not one of these markets, just let me know what you're interested in and I'll create this for you. What's awesome about this is it can be sort of a crowdsourced experience. You can go and look at them. Let's see, can we go, should we go and look at them? You can go and look at them and you can do comments on different properties, you know, and other people, you can have conversations with other people about it. So this is something that might be particularly sexy for someone who is one of my investor clients, where you might want to talk about multifamilies, and we can make this search go as wide as we want in terms of either all of Santa Clara County or down to Monterey or up to San Francisco. But we can do all of these and create cool comment streams about them. This is something I'm going to introduce to the folks on my meetup group so that we can have live chatting going on about those. But if you want to create one specifically for you, it'll text you with stuff. It will email you with stuff. It's not, you know, that's not mandatory. If you don't want to have your phone number involved, that's fine, but it'll do it live. So if someone clicks list in the MLS, as soon as the MLS is aware of it and it gets to this system, you're going to get a text about it. So you'll not only be getting the most up-to-date information, but you'll be getting it quicker than everyone else. The other thing is when there's price changes, you're going to get a notification. So anything happens to properties in these areas that meet very specific criteria, and I can create as many of these as I want. I could create one specifically for you, where you're the only person in there, and then you and I can comment back and forth about these properties. But it was a cool thing, so I decided to add that to my subscription set and introduce it on today's live stream in case anyone was interested. So feel free to reach out to me. Again, you can do that right here. You can head on over to the website and contact me this way, if that's what you would like to do, and we can create something for you. Or you can also reach out via Facebook Live or Facebook or YouTube, wherever else. Always ready to help you improve the way that we're efficiently going through all the data relating to our local markets. All right, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and call it there. It is about 15 minutes after, so I don't have anyone with any pending questions or any burning issues that they want to discuss. So we'll go ahead and call it till next month in terms of coffee and real estate. But of course, there's also the podcast. You can look for that this Monday. I am trying to keep to that Monday schedule. The only thing that ever delays me is when I end up working with clients too much over the weekend. I don't have time to put the podcast together. And in those cases, you're still going to get a podcast. It just might be later in the week, say Tuesday or Wednesday, as I find time to sit down and get a podcast done. And of course, you'll also be able to find upcoming market analysis specific. So I do a Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy separate market analysis videos that go up on YouTube that I also am going to be posting to Facebook. So you'll be able to find those there. So check them out when they come out if you want to get into more detail on certain markets. And we actually do get into some pretty good detail, sometimes even down to specific properties that are for sale and why they're good or why they're bad or what problems we might be having with expectations on the parts of buyers and sellers. So thanks again for coming out. I hope you all still have a little coffee left. I have quite a bit, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. But until next month, I hope you have a great time in real estate. I know I am.